Steve Shetler Media presents Tuesday Night Tune-Up, TNT. Coming to you from Smoky Row in Oskaloosa, Iowa. On Steve Shetler Media, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m., April 16th through August 13th. Hosted by Safe Grafke. Talking to local and area drivers. Get tuned up for the racing week ahead with Tuesday Night Tune-Up, TNT. Starting April 16th, live from Smoky Row in Oskaloosa, right here on Steve Shetler Media.
Welcome to this edition of Morgan Yass Sport Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Another week, college basketball, men's and women, is over. It is officially college off season, where we get into, the NFL, and we don't talk a lot of NBA or hockey or anything, but this is where we could, if the storylines do adjust, we will get to those this coming month or two. And then we usually take a little bit of a break, and we'll see about this summer. But really this, kind of recapping and summing up the Iowa women's season. Obviously, it's been a few days, but Iowa did lose to South Carolina in not a surprising game and how it played out. But that first quarter, they gave everyone hope, and they got out to the 10-0 start. Caitlin Clark had 18 points in the first quarter. And if there was a way they were going to win, that's how they had to play, and they had to keep playing like that. And unfortunately, they didn't.
Yeah, the best first quarter that we could ask for. Most definitely. It was a great start. And I haven't went back and watched any of the game, so I only watched the one time. But I did feel like in the second half, I think we got some decent looks. The ball just didn't go in the hoop. I thought we had some decent shots. I thought we maybe tried to go down low a little bit too much, but we also did have some scores there too. So, like I said, I haven't gone back and watched it. I don't know if I will. I'll probably wait a while. My biggest takeaway from the game, though, was probably about called an hour after it was over. I was relieved the season was over, actually. And I know I probably shouldn't say that. I don't know if any Iowa fans are going to agree with me on this, but the past 2 months have been nothing but stress to me.
Yep.
It's been the most fun 2 years, but the end of the regular season, had to win a bunch of games after that Nebraska debacle. Then the Big Ten tournament, Ohio State and Indiana lose, so we have no excuses. Got to win the Big Ten tournament. And then when the bracket comes out, you see Kansas State, Colorado, then probably LSU or UCLA. If we win that, we got, USC or UConn, and it was just the stress level just kept going up and up and up. And I don't know, I literally could feel stress leave my body after that game was over. And I can only imagine what those girls felt, because I've never experienced that in sports, to just be a fan watching and to have that exhale of stress leave my body, but it was real. I've never experienced that before. And I can only imagine, like I said, what that load that they were carrying.
Unfortunately, I get that a lot with Iowa State. I was that same way with the men's Iowa State, when they were playing. It's like, it's almost like just don't lose. It's like, and then, obviously they did against Illinois, and it's over, and so it doesn't matter. But you want them to do so well. You have no outcome, nothing you do affects the outcome or anything, but you want such good things to happen for them. And for Iowa, the women, they played as many games as you could play in the last 2 years. Really 2.5, because they won the Big Ten title 3 years in a row. They did get upset in that second round 3 years ago, but then they made the championship game the last 2 years, along with making, the Big Ten championships as well. The only way you could play it a few more games is to be a worse team, which obviously you don't want, is, to have an opening round game in the Big Ten title, or getting those play-in games for, the NCAA tournament, but then you're not going to get to the finals. So they played, I think I heard today that Gabby Marshall, Kate Martin, and Caitlin Clark started 135 games in a row together. That's unbelievable. Obviously that's 4 years. Got over 30. That's 35, almost 35 games each year.
Yeah, that's a ton of games, and those girls will go down as legends. And it was a fun 2 seasons. I wish we would have won the game, of course, but just in a weird way, I'm glad not to have a 2 or 3 day wait for another game, because it was nothing but stress, biting my fingernails, screaming during the games, yelling, all that type of stuff. But forever grateful because it was the most fun 2 years I've ever had watching sports.
Now, here's a question. We're going to get into legacy and stuff here, and we can start that. Do all three of those girls get their names up there in the rafters? Or do you do a team thing, like being a Final Four? Now, I do think they get like all the Hall of Fame. That team will be in the Hall of Fame, both last year's and this year's, with making the championship. But do you think Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin are up in the rafters?
Maybe. I know they just announced tonight at the pep rally or the thank you that they had at Carver Hawkeye that they're going to retire Caitlin Clark's number, which is no surprise, of course.
Right.
I don't know if they will. I'd be cool with it if they did. I mean, that's, back-to-back championship appearances. We will probably never see that again in our lifetime, as Iowa fans. So I'd be okay with it. I don't know if they will. It'll probably be a team thing. As you said, a team banner. Of course, they'll have the Final Four up there and made the championship game and all that. But as far as the individual banners or something, I don't know if they would, but I'd be okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, those three are, I mean, obviously Caitlin Clark is a star, but those three are kind of linked. And, you can say what you want about NIL and everything, but the amount of advertisements I saw on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram from Gabby Marshall and a couple of Kate Martin and Hannah Stolke and Molly Davis with Taco John's or Taco Bell. I can't remember which one they were, but that's what NIL is about. They did commercials. They're not just getting paid to play. Now, they probably are getting paid from the collective as well. Now, Caitlin Clark is not. She's making her own. But those girls took advantage of their celebrity and, right or wrong, piggybacking off of Caitlin Clark's success, which is what you want to do. And for whatever those girls made, great for them. And hopefully it made their lives and their family lives a little bit easier.
I just saw something an hour or two ago on Instagram. They showed the top 10 NIL sellers for the women's basketball. Clark was not involved with that. She's got her own thing going on, but I think 4 of the 10 were Iowa players. And it's funny because 2 nights ago, I just bought a Molly Davis and a Sydney Falter t-shirt off the Iowa NIL website. So, and I think both of them were on there, but 4 of the top 10 were Iowa players, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and that's just taking advantage of the situation we're in. Because, again, they wanted to win the game, but no matter what, that was the end of the season. And you hit on it 100%, and I agree. The relief almost for some of them and the stress and just now you can take a breath, relax a little bit, and just reflect and enjoy those last 2 years, because you really haven't been able to in the last 2 years because it's been nonstop go. You're trying to get better. Last year at this time, they're all trying to decide if they're going to come back or not, and what happens with the portal and NIL, and what's Caitlin going to do? What's everybody going to? Kate Martin obviously had a choice to make. Gabby Marshall had a choice to make. It was just last year at this time. And I do think, and I want to get your opinion, I think last year's loss was much more painful as well because they were favored to win the game and they didn't play their best. Foul trouble. Now, just the officials in the game, it caused both sides. It wasn't just Iowa, but the whole game was kind of chaotic. This one, I thought was ref relatively well. There were missed calls, and there's missed calls in every game. But overall, the refs did not decide this game. South Carolina was the better team. Lisa Bluter said it. Caitlin Clark said it. They just got beat by the best team in college basketball. And there's nothing you can say. You do your best. Yeah, a couple shots here, there go. They got it back to, I think, 5 in the fourth quarter, and I think had the ball and missed a shot. And kind of like the same thing Iowa State, you never really felt they were going to come back. But if you could get that one shot to make it, Iowa State had that chance to tie it. And, if you could get it to that one possession for the Hawkeyes there, you have a chance because you have the best player. And then you make one stop and Caitlin Clark comes down and hits a 3, and you just never know. but 7 McDonald's All-Americans, 6, 7 in the middle, just was too tough to overcome for Iowa in this game.
Close the gap. Like I said, I haven't went back and even watched any of the highlights just because I don't want to yet. But from what I remember, there was a couple times in the second half, as you said, we kind of cut the lead down. We'd make a shot, and from what I remember anyway, they'd go down and make one, or they'd miss. We'd get the ball back, and then we'd miss the next one. We just couldn't compound those shots to cut the lead down. So this year's loss wasn't as bad. I knew we'd have to play about a perfect game. First quarter we did, and then after that, it slowly just crept away from us. And as you said, I don't know if the girls would admit it, but it has to be a relief for them too, because they were carrying the whole state, especially this year, and not just the state of Iowa, but you saw the maps. Like 90% of the country was rooting for Iowa. You'd see all those maps on social media, so they had a lot of pressure on them, and I hope they can relax and look back on it now, because it was a heck of a 2 years for sure.
Yeah, and for those of you that did read that Wright Thompson article on Caitlin Clark, where they went on a cruise and Caitlin bought them an afternoon or a day on a yacht. Probably not going to be able to do that right now because, obviously Caitlin Clark's going to be the number 1 pick here in a week. But I hope when they get a little bit of time that she can get that team together and do something like that again for them, just to all celebrate what they did and what they accomplished and what they brought to women's basketball and just sports in general. I mean, it was Holly Rowe essentially moved to Iowa City about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and just followed the Hawkeye team. I mean, that's unbelievable. And that doesn't happen. She super promotes women's basketball, but she's, the Big Monday sideline reporter. She's, at the Duke Carolina games. She's not following a women's team 100% of the time, but she did with us. And they did a great job. And I think I saw there's on some service, whether it's Amazon Prime or Netflix or I think it might even be ESPN. There is a documentary or something like a Full Swing or with Caitlin Clark, Cardosa from South Carolina, and another person. So it's going to be well documented. I hope those girls get those keepsakes to put back. Not appreciate them right now, but when you're our age or a little older, you have that stuff and can look back and just remember those fun times.
Absolutely. And then, the couple days, especially the day after on all the talk shows, I thought the talk shows did a really good job because, they talked about South Carolina being the better team. And of course, there was the GOAT talk that came up. But a lot of talk shows did the right thing, I thought. And they congratulated Caitlin Clark for being the most influential women's athlete probably ever, as far as getting ratings. And I really thought that was the main point, actually, because what she's done is really never been done before in women's sports. And it was funny because I listen to Coward every day, and his partner there on the show, Jason McIntyre, were saying a lot of people were upset that South Carolina wasn't getting all the attention the next day after they won. It still felt like Iowa was getting more attention. And Colin said it right. He's like, don't confuse the best team for the best story. He's like, South Carolina was the best team. He said Caitlin Clark and Iowa were the story. He's like, there's a difference. And Iowa led the way. If I was South Carolina or their fans, I'd probably be a little upset too if we weren't getting, the attention that we probably feel we deserve for winning the championship. But Iowa was the story.
Yeah, and specifically Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, right.
Yes, it was always Iowa, but every game Caitlin Clark played in, from the LSU game on, was the highest women's rated women's basketball game of all time. The women outdrew the men's championship game, which again had the 2 best teams. I truly believe Purdue and UConn were the 2 best teams. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you can't say there wasn't, the best 2 women's teams played and the best 2 men's teams played for the championship. So this tournament did find the true champion. Doesn't always work out that way, but I think this year it was in both. And again, you look back, I haven't went back and watched it either, but did Caitlin Clark play a very good game? You'd probably say no. She still had 30. She had 30 points. And it was like, Now, and we talked about this. She needed 40 or more to win that basketball game. And it was proven right. She needed to have a special game, and she didn't quite have it, but she still had 30 points.
Still at 30, which you're right. It probably wasn't her best game. It was still a pretty good game, though. Obviously, for a lot of people, that would be a career one, especially on that stage. And then do you want to transition into the WNBA just for a little bit? Just a
Yep.
few topics on that.